chemotherapy part, antibacterial drugs, antifungal drugs, anti-cancer drugs, antiviral drugs, drug therapy of malaria, amoebiasis, etc. etc. Okay, so antiprotozoal drugs. So out of that, today we are going to start chemotherapy chapter. Today I will try to finish the basic principles and sulfur drugs and quinolones in a very short, so that you will have a quick revision of this. So today we'll see about antibacterial drugs, particularly the basic principles about the about sulfonamides and quinolones. This part is again very important. It is a very important part. Lot of questions they used to ask on classification as well as on the mechanism as well as on the specific adverse effect. So these 3 points from this antibacterial drugs are very important. तो क्लासिफिकेशन इंपॉर्टेंट है बहुत ज़्यादा. उसके बाद मैकेनिज्म, ठीक है, उसके बाद एंटीबायोटिक का सोर्स, उसके बाद थोड़ा बहुत हिस्ट्री भी इंपॉर्टेंट है उसका. सो विल सी इट वन बाय वन. एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग्स, हार्मोनल ड्रग्स विल टेक एट द एंड. So first of all, you should know what do you mean by antibacterial drugs or antibiotics. So this term, it is made up of two words, anti and biotic. Okay? Anti and biosis. What do you mean by anti? Anti means opposite, working opposite. Biosis means a life. So against the life, whatever is acting against the life. That means anything that will act against the life. कि बैक्टीरिया का लाइफ होता है, जैसे पैथोजेनिक ऑर्गेनिज्म होते हैं, बैक्टीरिया, फंगाई, एक्टिनोमाइसिट्स, स्ट्रेप्टोकोकाई, एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. So all these are the pathogenic microorganisms to our human beings. They causes various kind of diseases to our. If there is an infection of these microorganisms, so in the ancient era there was no medicine, but later there was a huge development in this antibacterial field. So there was a lot of antimicrobial agents coming in the picture by invention by various scientists. So antibiotic is nothing but any chemical substance produced by microorganism having property to inhibit or to destroy the microorganism in very dilute proportion. So antibiotic क्या है? Is a drug obtained either from synthetic origin or from microbial source. So पहले ज़माने में क्या होता था कि पहले ज़माने में most of the antibacterial they were synthesized in the lab. So that's why so antibiotic was the term. Nowadays, so these chemicals or antimicrobial drug they are obtained from both process, either from synthetic, either from semi-synthetic, or from semi-synthetic means they are precursor or the raw material is obtained from microbial source, and then after processing or after specific processing you will get your drug. So synthetic as well as semi-synthetic, that means natural, synthetic, semi-synthetic. So basically what is antibiotic? Antibiotic is any kind of drug that can destroy or inhibit the growth of microorganism in a very dilute concentration, means in a very less concentration. They might be obtained either from synthetic origin or maybe from microbial origin. So these are the chemical or substances produced by microorganism having property to inhibit or destroy other microorganism living and multiplying in the living organism in a high dilution. That is a definition of antibiotic. Okay, so they might ask you question on this: who is the father of chemotherapy? Who is the father of chemotherapy? So remember, chemotherapy means what? It is a kind of treatment. It is a kind of treatment using chemicals to destroy the invading microorganism. जो आपके बॉडी में इन्फेक्शन करने वाले माइक्रोऑर्गेनिज्म है उनको डिस्ट्रॉय करने के लिए जो ट्रीटमेंट यूज करते हैं उसको केमोथेरेपी बोलते हैं. केमोथेरेपी मीन्स यूज ऑफ एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग्स. केमोथेरेपी मीन्स यूज ऑफ एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग. Now this chemotherapy term it is used, okay, it is used parallelly with the treatment of cancer. कैंसर का ट्रीटमेंट जब करते हैं उसमें भी आपको ये टर्म आएगा केमोथेरेपी. बट कैंसर केमोथेरेपी इज लिटिल बिट different and this antibacterial chemotherapy is little bit different. Though chemotherapy parallelly or it is simultaneously used for both antibacterial drugs as well as anti-cancer drugs, but there is a little bit difference. एंटी कैंसर ड्रग में क्या, एंटी कैंसर ड्रग वो अलग चीज होता है, एंटी बैक्टीरियल ड्रग अलग चीज होता है. एंटी बैक्टीरियल ड्रग क्या करेंगे, बैक्टीरिया को मारेंगे. सो एंटी बैक्टीरियल ड्रग दे विल डिस्ट्रॉय, दे विल किल द बैक्टीरिया व्हिच आर पैथोजेनिक टू आवर ह्यूमन सिस्टम. सो दोज इन्फेक्शंस which are causing various diseases. So drugs will destroy them. That is a antibacterial drug. Now in case of anti-cancer drug, so in the anti-cancer means cancer means what? Cancer is nothing but the वो कहाँ से foreign से infection नहीं होता. So cancer is not any kind of infection. So whatever your cells are there, so there is uncontrolled growth or uncontrolled differentiation of your own cells. तो आपके खुद के ही सेल बढ़ रहे हैं ज़्यादा, तो उसको बोलेंगे कैंसर. So chemotherapy was first described for the treatment of antibacterial drugs. Treatment using antibacterial drug. So chemotherapy पहली बार antibacterial drug के लिए यूज किया है. आजकल लोग chemotherapy इसके लिए यूज करते हैं कैंसर के लिए, but that is a different thing. कैंसर के बारे में अपन बाद में बात करेंगे when we will see anti-cancer drugs. So remember father of chemotherapy. Who is father of chemotherapy? Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich is the father of. Then after that there was a lot of invention. There was a lot of development in the field of chemotherapy. Alexander Fleming in 1928 they found the penicillins molds or from fungus known as a Penicillium notatum. पहली बार अलेक्जेंडर फ्लेमिंग ने पेनिसिलिन्स का इन्वेंशन किया था. So he found that there is one chemical which is able to inhibit the growth of microorganism in the surrounding medium. Now, chemical produced by microorganism itself. There is a chemical produced by microorganism and that is capable of inhibiting the growth of another microorganism. जैसे होता है फंगस में क्या है कि पेनिसिलियम नोटाटम it was producing this chemical penicillin and was able to inhibit the growth of Staphylococcus aureus. Okay. So he observed this chemical produced in the Penicillium notatum and he named his as a penicillin. Okay. So penicillins was found by Alexander Fleming. There are certain terms you have to understand. Actually, these are very simple terms you should be clear regarding this. First term is a bactericidal. So any drug or any antibiotic, if it can destroy or kill the microorganism. Anything that can destroy or kill the microorganism is known as a bactericidal. Bactericidal होता है bacteristatic term होता है. What is meant by bactericidal? So anything that can kill or destroy the microorganism known as a bactericidal. ये kill करेगा, destroy करेगा bactericidal. Okay. Now there is another term known as a bacteriostatic. So what do you mean by bacteriostatic? Bacteriostatic means static means to stop. Static means to stop or inhibit. So bacteriostatic means anything that can stop the growth of bacteria is known as a bacteriostatic. So those antibiotics or drugs that can inhibit the growth of microorganism known as a bacteriostatic. जैसे bactericidal का example होता है आपका penicillin. So penicillins they will kill the bacteria. And a bacteriostatic drug, for example, sulfur drugs, they will inhibit the growth of bacteria. Okay, so static means growth inhibitor, cidal means killer. Okay, so you have to remember this. Okay, so how these antimicrobial drugs they will act? They will act in a different. They will act by different mechanism. So there are different targets for antimicrobial drugs. These antimicrobial drug or antibiotic they can kill the bacteria or pathogenic bacteria or they can prevent the growth or they will stop their growth. How? So there are different targets. They used to bind to different targets of bacterial cell. Bacterial cell में different targets होते हैं जैसे bacterial cell wall हो गया, cytoplasmic membrane, ribosomes हो गए, कुछ RNA molecule को bind करेंगे या फिर DNA polymerase को bind करके inhibit करेंगे या फिर supercoiling prevent करेंगे. Some antibiotics they will bind to enzymes. They will prevent they will inactivate these enzymes and prevent the DNA synthesis, replication, transcription, translation. These are nothing but the targets. तो targets क्या होते हैं उसके वो कहाँ पे bind करके inhibit करेंगे उसको. तो remember cell wall, cytoplasmic membrane, ribosomes, RNA molecules, okay, then DNA, then enzymes required for DNA replication, transcription, translation, etc. In a short, you can see over here. Suppose it is a bacterial cell. This is your bacterial cell. Okay, it is your bacterial cell. Okay, so what are the different targets? So first, some few antibacterial drugs. For example, your sulfur drugs and methotrexate. So they will inhibit the intermediate metabolism in the bacteria. Bacteria का metabolism जो होता है, for example, folic acid is very important component for bacterial metabolism. One carbon atom chain transfer. उसके लिए folic acid बहुत ही important है. Now that metabolism of folic acid is done inside the cell. So dihydrofolic acid is converted to tetrahydrofolic acid, and then okay, so like folic acid is converted to dihydrofolic acid, then tetrahydrofolic acid. So now this conversion is blocked by these two drugs, sulfonamides and methotrexate. So for example, so bacteria में क्या है, para amino butyric acid papa that is converted to dihydrofolic acid, then tetrahydrofolic acid, and then finally the tetrahydrofolic acid is utilized for transfer of one carbon atom chain reaction. Now that is inhibited by sulfonamides methotrexate. So they inhibit the intermediate metabolism in the bacterial cell. तो bacterial cell का metabolism ये inhibit करेंगे. ये बैक्टीरिया को मारेंगे नहीं, उसका मेटाबॉलिज्म inhibit करेंगे ताकि बैक्टीरिया जिंदा बचे. Ultimately, they are some antibiotics. They will inhibit the cell wall synthesis in the bacteria. ठीक है, बैक्टीरिया के ऊपर सेल वॉल होता है, आपको मालूम है. So that is a synthesized by bacteria in a different process. So bacterial cell wall synthesis inhibition is done by penicillin, cephalosporins, then glycopeptide, then phosphomycin, bacitracin, and alpha-salafacin. Alpha-salafacin. So these drugs they will inhibit the cell wall synthesis. तो सेल वॉल अगर बैक्टीरिया का जो सिंथेसिस बनता है, जब बैक्टीरिया मल्टीप्लाई होता है बॉडी में, so when there is a multiplication of bacteria inside the body, so it develops a new bacteria, new bacterial cell wall, its component, nucleic acid, in everything. So these drugs they will prevent the formation of cell wall. Whatever cell wall is there, so cell wall will be formation of cell wall will be inhibited. So what happen if there is no cell wall in the bacterial cell? So bacteria will die, obviously. So again, bacterial cell wall synthesis inhibited. Penicillin, cephalosporins, glycopeptides, phosphomycin, bacitracin, then alafosfacin. Okay, so these are the drugs. Now there are certain drugs which inhibit different. So for example, cell membrane synthesis inhibitors. So ये क्या करेंगे, सेल मेम्ब्रेन सिंथेसिस को इनहिबिट करेंगे, जैसे lipopeptides. Then there are certain drugs which inhibit the DNA dependent RNA polymerase. So for example, transcription inhibitor, RNA synthesis inhibitor like anamycin. These drugs will inhibit the RNA. Now DNA kinase inhibitor. During the DNA replication, we have seen in the last biochemistry session. During the DNA replication, so जैसे DNA replication में replication के लिए वो DNA open होना चाहिए. So DNA helicase will open double stranded DNA. So what happen? At the one end, DNA helicase will open the double stranded DNA. But at the another end, so due to that opening of double stranded DNA, so another end of DNA will get coiled again. So it will get super coiled. So there will be super coiling of the DNA at another end. एक एंड पे तो डीएनए हेलिकेज ओपन करेगा, दूसरे एंड पे उसका सुपर कॉइलिंग होगा. सो दैट सुपर कॉइलिंग इज रिलीव्ड. ओके, तो सुपर कॉइलिंग वो रिलीव किया जाता है. कौन करता है उसका? उसको बोलते हैं गायरेज, डीएनए गायरेज एंजाइम, और इट इज आल्सो नोन एज topoisomerase. We have seen topoisomerase, they will prevent the super coiling of DNA, which is very important for a living, okay, of bacteria. Now these DNA kinase inhibitor like fluoroquinones, then coumarimycin, quinolones and coumarimycin. So they will inhibit the DNA kinase enzyme or topoisomerase enzyme. So that's how different drug, they have different targets for antimicrobial. They have different targets for microbial cell. ये हर एक ड्रग कैसे एक्ट करेंगे? So DNA kinase inhibitors, then intermediate metabolism inhibitors like sulfur drugs, okay, trimethoprim, etc., methotrexate. Cell membrane synthesis inhibitor like lipopeptide, then cell wall synthesis inhibitor like cephalosporin, penicillin, glycopeptide, phosphomycin, bacitracin, then alafosfacin, and then DNA dependent RNA polymerase inhibitor like rifampicin, then RNA synthesis inhibitor like anamycin. Some drug they are a protein synthesis inhibitor. Some drugs are a protein synthesis inhibitor. So they will inhibit the protein synthesis, transcription, है ना? जैसे होता है डीएनए रेप्लिकेशन, उसके बाद में ट्रांसक्रिप्शन, उसके बाद में ट्रांसलेशन. ट्रांसलेशन मीन्स प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस. वी हैव नॉट सीन दैट ट्रांसलेशन, वो बाकी है अपना ट्रांसक्रिप्शन, ट्रांसलेशन. बट दिस ट्रांसलेशन मीन्स conversion of mRNA or expression of mRNA into protein. So protein synthesis, there are different steps for protein synthesis, different enzymes required. Okay? So these are the drug, they also inhibit the protein synthesis by binding either to 30th ribosome or 50th ribosome. For example, tetracycline, aminoglycoside, macrolides, lincosamide, oxazolidine. तो यहाँ पे आपको सिर्फ यही you have to remember this, that there are different targets on microbial cell. So those targets are very important. So antimicrobial drug, they bind to these targets, and they inhibit the growth, or they will kill the bacteria. So sidal and static effect of antimicrobial drug, they are because of the binding of these drug to a targets. There are more targets, but at least you should know these targets. क्वेश्चन आता है कौन प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस इनहिबिट करेगा कौन नहीं करेगा. So we'll see the classification in upcoming slide. So let's see some historical points behind this chemotherapy or antibacterial drugs. So antibacterial drugs, antibacterial principles found in the different natural substances, they were known to us. For example, the Chinese people, they were using curd, moldy curd. Chinese people was using moldy curd to treatment और boils मतलब ये बेंड जैसा boils जो आपके बैक साइड पे आते हैं boils. So Chinese people, they were using this moldy curd मतलब आपका जो दही होता है उसमें फंगस ग्रोथ होने के बाद में उसको बोलते हैं moldy curd. So they were using moldy curd for treatment of boils. Then our Hindus was using chaul mogra oil for the treatment of leprosy. Then again chenopodium oil or chenopodium was used by acids for intestinal infection. Acids एक जाती है होगी. Then use of mercury by this Paracelsus was there for treatment of syphilis in 16th century. 16th century में ये Paracelsus ने mercury के compound use किए for the treatment of syphilis. That is one of the sexual transmitted disease. Okay, it is caused by Trypoma pedalium. Remember question आ चुका है. The causative agent for syphilis, Trypoma pedalium. So ये बाद में भी आएगा आपको. In the 17th century, again use of cinchona bark. So it was known to our ancestor also, but at that time it was not a fully developed. At that time it was not a fully established. After that, this Paul Ehrlich, he found certain dyes कि उन्होंने देखा ये कुछ डाई होते हैं जो कलर्स होते हैं, they selectively binds to the microbes, they selectively stains to the microbes. Okay, for example, methylene blue, tryptan red. Okay, they selectively binds to microbes and kills them. Then again he also developed a mercurial compound. He also developed some arsenical compound for sleeping sickness and for syphilis. Paul Ehrlich, and that's why he is known as a father of chemotherapy. Remember, father of chemotherapy is nothing but the Paul Ehrlich. Okay. Now after this, there is one scientist again, this Domek. Domek in 1935, he explained the effect of proton cell. He explained the effect of proton cell. Okay. Proton cell होता है, pronto cell नहीं. Pronto cell dye. Okay. Pronto cell dye. He explained the effect of pronto cell dye in the pyogenic infection. जो pyrogens थे वो टेम्परेचर बढ़ते हैं उसमें प्रोटॉन सेल डाई यूज किया उसने, और he explained the effect of antimicrobial effect of proton cell dye. Later it was found that कि बाद में पता चला कि प्रोटॉन सेल डाई जो है वो ब्रेक होकर क्या बनता है, सल्फानिलामाइड. Louis Pasteur also demonstrated the phenomenon of antibiosis in 1877. ठीक है, 1877 में ये लुई पाश्चर ने भी बोला है कि antibiosis phenomena means inhibition of growth of microorganism is known as antibiosis given by Pasteur. But remember यहाँ पे father of chemotherapy इसको बोलते हैं Paul Ehrlich. Okay. Are you getting? Am I audible you clearly? आवाज येता है? Now after that, this Alexander Fleming, a very breakthrough was there, a promising breakthrough was there when in the 19th century, 1920 to 1930, 10 years. So in the 19th century, this Fleming, Alexander Fleming, found the penicillins. They found the penicillin antibiotic. He found that there is a certain kind of chemical which is released by fungus, which is capable of inhibiting the growth of other microorganisms like Staphylococcus. So he found that the chemical, and he named it penicillins. उसने क्या किया, केमिकल जो है उसका नाम दिया पेनिसिलिन, लेकिन उसने आइसोलेट नहीं किया. So there was no isolation of penicillin by Fleming. He was just invented this penicillin. He was named that penicillin. Okay. After that was isolation by another people. Now another Waltzman and his co-worker, they found a antibiotic, again a new antibiotic from actinomycetes, and that was named as a streptomycin. Question इसके ऊपर आ चुका है. Founded the streptomycin, or who credit of invention of streptomycin was goes to. Okay, so this Waltzman and his co-worker, they found the antibiotic, new antibiotic from actinomycetes, and it is nothing but the streptomycin in 1940. क्वेश्चन इसके ऊपर आ चुका है. Natural source of antibiotic. Natural source of antibiotic. So naturally antibiotics, they are obtained from either bacteria, or they are obtained from fungus, or they are obtained from actinomycetes. So for example, antibiotics like penicillins, cephalosporins and griseopulmin. Question आता है इसका. For example, penicillins, cephalosporins and griseopulins, they are obtained from fungus. जैसे penicillin जो आता है वो penicillium notatum से आता है, and nowadays it is commercially obtained from penicillium chrysogenum. First time is कहाँ से आया था? Penicillium notatum. Nowadays it is obtained from commercially from penicillium chrysogenum. Cephalosporin भी fungus से आता है, griseopulmin भी fungus से आता है. We'll see in upcoming. Remember fungus, okay? They are the source for penicillin, cephalosporin and griseopulmin antibiotic. Now bacteria. So what are the examples of antibiotic obtained from bacteria? Okay, so polymyxin B, colistin, then bacitracin, azithromycin and thyrothricin. These are the antibiotics obtained from bacterial. So antibiotics obtained from actinomycetes, जैसे अमोनिया ग्लाइकोसाइड्स हो गए, टेट्रासाइक्लिन्स, क्लोरमफेनिकोल, मैक्रोलाइड्स एंड पोलिन्स. These are obtained from actinomycetes. So you have to remember this कि कौन सा एंटीबायोटिक कहाँ से आता है, कौन सा एंटीबायोटिक कहाँ से आता है. They can ask question on this. Remember from fungus, penicillin, cephalosporin and griseopulmin. Okay, so these from bacteria, polymyxin B for bacteria, colistin, then bacitracin, baci में bacteria आता है तो bacitracin, azithromycin, then thyrothricin. So these are obtained from bacteria. From actinomycetes, A for aminoglycosides. ऐसा ट्रिक याद रखो, ट्रिक कुछ लगा सकते हो. जैसे एक्टिनोमाइसिस से कौन आता है? A for aminoglycosides. Then tetracycline, chloramphenicol, macrolides, choline. These are obtained from actinomycetes. So fungi से कौन आता है? Bacteria से कौन आता है? Actinomycetes से कौन आता है? We will see the antibacterial drugs, the classification of antibacterial drug. There are there are different way to classify this antibacterial drug. There are different ways. So depending upon the chemical structure, depending upon the mechanism of action, depending upon the source, depending upon the type of pathogen they act on, like antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, okay, anti-rickettsial, like that. Okay, and depending upon the spectrum, broad spectrum antibiotics, narrow spectrum antibiotic. So there are different way to classify the antibacterial drug. Antibacterial drug classification के लिए बहुत सारे type होते हैं. जैसे depending on the mechanism of action, तो mechanism क्या है उसका, depending upon the source क्या है उसका, depending upon the chemical structure, depending upon the chemical class, or depending upon the therapeutic uses. जैसे bactericidal, bacteriostatic antibiotic, bactericidal as well as bacteriostatic antibiotic. So therapeutic uses, then spectrum of action. So narrow spectrum, broad spectrum, like that. There are different ways. So first we'll see antibacterial drug classified by their mechanism of action. Okay. So depending on their mechanism of action, antibiotics are classified into different ways. So first class, those antibiotic which inhibit the cell wall of your bacteria. Bacteria का cell wall ही बनने नहीं देंगे. For example, penicillins, cephalosporins, then carbapenems, monobactams, vancomycin, cycloserine and bacitracin. यहाँ पे इसको याद कैसे रखना है? ठीक है, ये याद कैसे रखना है इसको? So यहाँ पे देखो PCC ये एक होता है. जैसे आप ये होता है टेरेस होता है, या फिर आपका जो गैलरी होता है, उसमें आप क्या करते हो, सीमेंट का एक ये करते हो, सीमेंट का पीसीसी करते हो. पीसीसी, पी फॉर पेनिसिलिन, सी फॉर सेफलोस्पोरिन, सी फॉर कार्बापेनम, सी फॉर साइक्लोसेरिन, ओके, एंड बीएमवी बेसिट्रासिन, वैंकोमाइसिन, मोनोबैक्टीरियम. यू हैव टू यूज ट्रिक्स लाइक दिस. तो इतना इजी नहीं है, या फिर आपको रटना ही पड़ेगा. यू हैव टू remember. So those inhibit the cell wall synthesis. Penicillin, cephalosporins, carbapenem, monobactam, vancomycin, cycloserine and bacitracin. Second, Okay, so those antibiotic which causes leakage from the cell membrane, बैक्टीरिया का सेल मेम्ब्रेन होता है उसमें पोर्स करेंगे, तो बैक्टीरियल सेल मेम्ब्रेन क्या करेंगे, पोर्स करेंगे ताकि अंदर का जो कंटेंट है बैक्टीरिया का जो कंटेंट है मतलब जो सेलुलर कंटेंट that will come out, bacteria will die. Okay? So those causes leakage from the cell membrane, polymyxin, colistin, bacitracin and amphotericin. Okay? तो इसको ABCP A for amphotericin, B for bacitracin, C for colistin and so ABCP. Okay, so cell leakage causes leakage from the cell membrane, they induces the pores, ये छेद करेंगे सेल वॉल में, so that whatever the intracellular fluid is there, so that will come out and bacteria will die, so they causes leakage from the cell membrane. Now third class, those antibiotic which inhibits the प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस, तो जो बैक्टीरिया का होता है रेप्लिकेशन के बाद में ट्रांसक्रिप्शन, ट्रांसक्रिप्शन के बाद में ट्रांसलेशन, ट्रांसलेशन मतलब प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस। ओके, सो जैसे बैक्टीरिया, जैसे ही आपके बैक्टीरिया आपके बॉडी में एंटर करेगा, सो व्हेन देयर इज एन इन्फेक्शन, सो बैक्टीरिया विल एंटर इन बॉडी, it will have incubation period, it will incubate itself for around that depends on the different type of bacteria कि वो अंदर बॉडी में आपका खुद को बिठा लेगा बाद में, so they it will start to multiply, it will start to divide, so there will be replication, multiple copies of DNA, transcription and then translation, and then after that there will be multiplication of bacteria. Okay, so inhibition of protein synthesis, so these antibiotic like tetracycline, chlorompenicol, erythromycin, tetracyclines, chlorompenicol, erythromycin or other macrolides, clindamycin and linezolid. Linezolid. Okay. So you can remember like L-cis-CoA-T, LCT. Okay. L for linezolid, C for clindamycin and chlorompenicol, LCET, E for या फिर M भी लिख सकते हो, M means macrolides, LCMT, L for linezolid, C for clindamycin, C for chlorompenicol, M for macrolides and T for tetracycline. So these drugs they inhibit the protein synthesis. Question आता है कि one of the following antibiotic will not inhibit the bacterial protein synthesis. ऐसा घुमा फिरा क्वेश्चन आएगा. Those drug, next class is nothing but the fourth class. Those causes misreading of mRNA and affect the permeability. तो misreading करेंगे जो mRNA के ऊपर जो कोड होता है उसके अकॉर्डिंगली क्या होगा, प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस होगा. ओके, या फिर उसके अकॉर्डिंगली अमीनो एसिड बुलाया जाएगा. सो दे कॉजेज द मिसरीडिंग ऑन mRNA code. So for example, aminoglycosides, all aminoglycosides have the same in that streptomycin, gentamicin and other. Those drugs which inhibit the DNA gyrase inhibitor. DNA gyrase inhibitor means topoisomerase inhibitor. Okay? So ciprofloxacin, nalidixic acid and other neuroquinones. Then those drugs which interfere with the DNA function, they will inhibit the DNA polymerase. ये क्या करेंगे, DNA polymerase को inhibit करेंगे. So rifampicin. Those drugs which interfere with the intermediary metabolism of bacteria. जो बैक्टीरियल मेटाबॉलिज्म होता है उसमें ये इंटरफेयर करेंगे या फिर उसको डिस्टर्ब करेंगे. फॉर एग्जांपल सल्फोनामाइड्स, सल्फोन, ट्राइमेथोप्रिन, पायरिमेथामाइन and para-aminosalicylate acid, metronidazole. You can remember like S square TP square, okay, S2 TP2M ऐसा. जैसे S2 मतलब सल्फोनामाइड सल्फोन, TP मतलब ट्राइमेथोप्रिन, पायरिमेथामाइन, para-aminosalicylate acid, पास, इसको पास भी बोलते हैं. Metronidazole. So these are nothing but the classes of antibacterial drug depending on the mechanism of action. Now we'll see classification of antibiotic again. So as I have told you, मैंने पहले बोला कि आपको there are different way to classify the antibacterial drug. So first, depending on the active against the type of organism. कौन से organism के ऊपर active है, तो उसके basis पे भी उनको classify. So that is nothing but the. So some drugs are effective against the bacteria, some drugs are effective against the fungi, like virus, etc., etc., antiprotozoal. So those drugs which are effective against the bacteria, known as antibacterial antibiotics. Depending on the active against the type of microorganism. कौन से माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म के ऊपर एक्टिव है उसके अगेंस्ट में करता है. सो एंटीबैक्टीरियल एंटीबायोटिक. सो पेनिसिलिन पेनिसिलिन then cephalosporins, aminoglycosides, macrolides. So all these are the antibacterial. Particularly they are effective against the bacterial infection. ये bacterial infection में effective है. Now those which are against the fungus, so antifungal drug, antifungal antibiotics. For example, these ketoconazole, amphotericin B, then griseofulvin. They are particularly antifungal antibiotics. Now those drugs which are active against the virus, known as antiviral antibiotics or antiviral drug, antiviral antibiotics particularly. Antiviral drug, it might not be antibiotic. एंटीवायरल ड्रग का ऐसा नहीं कि हर एक एंटीवायरल ड्रग एंटीबायोटिक ही होगा. सो देर आर अदर एंटीवायरल ड्रग विच आर नॉट एंटीबायोटिक बट they act as a they act by a different mechanism. So antiviral antibiotic like amantadine and zidovudine, then anti-protozoal antibiotics. So they are effective against the protozoa, like it causes different diseases like malaria, okay, then malaria, then ascariasis, etc., etc. So chloropine, pyrimethamine, metronidazole, diloxanide, fluoride. These are the example. Now next is nothing but the anthelmintic drug. What do you mean by anthelmintic? So these drug they will decrease the protozoal infection in the GIT. Protozoa होता है. So anthelmintic they will repel the worms from the intestine. They will remove the worms from intestine. For example, mebendazole, albendazole, diethylcarbamazine citrate, in parental. Okay. These are the anthelmintic. Now this is the first group. Now depending upon the mechanism of action we have seen that. So those antibiotics which will inhibit the cell wall, penicillin, cephalosporin, cycloserine, vancomycin, bacitracin. Those which will cause leakage to cell wall, like यहाँ पे इसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन आ चुका है. So one of the following antibiotic class of antibiotics या फिर antibiotic they will causes the leakage from the membrane of bacteria. So remember, so you have to remember this polypeptide antibiotic like polymyxin, colistin, choline, amphotericin B, and nystatin. And inhibition of protein synthesis. So inhibition of protein synthesis, those drugs which inhibit the protein synthesis, we have already seen this classification. In that you have tetracyclines, chloramphenicol, macrolides, antibiotic like clindamycin, linezolid, etc. Those drugs which causes misreading of mRNA code and affect the permeability, like aminoglycosides, like streptomycin, topramycin, gentamicin. All these are the examples of aminoglycosides. So aminoglycoside. Then DNA kinase inhibitor. All these are nothing but fluoroquinones or nalidixic acid derivative. तो फ्लोरोक्विनोन्स में आपका वही आता है सिप्रोफ्लॉक्सासिन, ओफ्लॉक्सासिन, मॉक्सीफ्लॉक्सासिन, कोई गैटिफ्लॉक्सासिन. All these are the fluoroquinones. Then those drugs interfere with the DNA function, like rifampicin is there, metronidazole is there. When interfere with the DNA synthesis, zidovudine, acyclovir. So acyclovir particularly is an antiviral drug. Acyclovir is an antiviral. Okay, इसका mechanism भी पूछते हैं. Then we'll see antiviral drug at that time. We will explain. Now interfere with the metabolism like sulfur drugs, okay, trimethoprim, ethambutol. We'll see the next. This classification is more important than others. जो बाकी क्लासिफिकेशन है उसके ज़्यादा सबसे ज़्यादा ये इम्पोर्टेंट है. वैसे मैकेनिज्म का भी क्लासिफिकेशन बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट है, इसके ऊपर भी क्वेश्चन आता है. नाउ डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द केमिकल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ एंटीबायोटिक, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द केमिकल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ एंटीबायोटिक दे आर क्लासिफाइड इन डिफरेंट वे. फर्स्ट सल्फोनामाइड्स एंड रिलेटेड ड्रग्स. तो इसमें क्या रहेगा, उसमें सल्फोनामाइड मोइटी रहेगी, SO2NH. So those drugs which will have sulfonamide moiety. For example, sulfadiazine, sulfacetamide, dapsone, okay, sulfamethoxy, okay, sulfomethazole, etc. Both sorry. Then aminosalicylic acid like para-aminosalicylic acid like PAS, para-aminosalicylic acid. Then dapsone, dimethyl diphenyl dapsone, and all the sulfur drugs they belongs to sulfonamide category because they will have SO2NH group in the structure. Diaminopyrimidine, okay, diaminopyrimidine derivative. So in that you have trimethoprim and pyrimethamine. तो इसका related भी question आता है. Trimethoprim is a diaminopyrimidine derivative और and pyrimethamine is also same. So they will inhibit the intermediate metabolism in the quinolones antibiotic. इसमें क्विनोलोन रिंग रहेगा, क्विनोलोन रिंग। सो इसमें आता है नैलिडेक्सिक एसिड, नॉरफ्लोक्सिसिन, सिप्रोफ्लोक्सिसिन, गेटिफ्लोक्सिसिन, ओफ्लोक्सिसिन, स्पारफ्लोक्सिसिन, बहुत सारे। So quinolone antibiotics. Most of them they are used for the they are used for either your UTI, urinary tract infection, and GTI, gastrointestinal tract infection. Okay, so quinolones mostly used for UTI as well as GTI. ठीक है, बाद में अपन देखेंगे. Next one is a beta lactam antibiotics. So they will have beta lactam ring. ठीक है, लैक्टम मतलब क्या है? देखो, लैक्टम मतलब ऐसा कुछ स्ट्रक्चर रहेगा, बायोमेट्रिक जैसे बायोमेट्रिक, यहाँ पे एक नाइट्रोजन रहेगा, यहाँ पे डबल बॉन्ड रहेगा. So beta lactam, okay. Beta lactam means what? Lactam means NH2C double bond O, that is known as lactam, and that ketone is present on a beta carbon, beta position, beta to this amino group, that's why beta lactam. So these structure is found in the penicillins, cephalosporins, मोनोबैक्टम, कार्बापेनम. ठीक है, ये भी याद रखो, मोनोबैक्टम एंड कार्बापेनम. तो फिर बहुत सारे टाइम पे कंफ्यूजन होता है कि बीटा लैक्टम एंटीबायोटिक आपको दो ही याद रहते हैं, सेफलोस्पोरिन्स एंड पेनिसिलिन्स. सो रिमेंबर, मोनोबैक्टम्स, कार्बापेनम्स, दे आर आल्सो बिलोंग्स टू बीटा लैक्टम एंटीबायोटिक्स. बैक्टम, कार्बापेनम्स, देन होता है ना पेनिसिलिनेज, वो जो है बीटा लैक्टमेज इनहिबिटर्स. So they are also beta lactam antibiotics. Beta lactamase inhibitor, penicillins, cephalosporins, monobactam, carbapenem. Then tetracycline. Tetracycline में क्या रहेगा? चार रिंग रहेंगे. टेट्रा मतलब 4, cyclines मतलब cycle. Okay? There are 4 rings. 2 naphthalene ring joined together. That is known as tetracycline. So in that we have oxytetracycline, doxycycline, okay, chlorotetracycline and all that. Then nitrobenzene derivative. नाइट्रो मतलब बेंजीन मतलब बेंजीन, नाइट्रोबेंजीन डेरिवेटिव. सो इट इज नथिंग बट द क्लोरोम्फेनिकोल. इसके ऊपर भी क्वेश्चन आ चुका है. सो इट इज अ नाइट्रोबेंजीन डेरिवेटिव. ठीक है, नाइट्रोबेंजीन. ठीक है, इसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन आ चुका है, इसके ऊपर नाइट्रोबेंजीन के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आ चुका है. सो वन ऑफ द फॉलोइंग इज अ नाइट्रोबेंजीन डेरिवेटिव. क्लोरोम्फेनिकोल इज अ नाइट्रोबेंजीन डेरिवेटिव. व्हेन वी विल सी द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ सेम एट द टाइम आल्सो आई विल एक्सप्लेन. अमाइनो ग्लाइकोसाइड्स. सो अमाइनो मतलब यहाँ पे कुछ अमाइन स्ट्रक्चर रहेगा, अमाइन हेटेरोसाइक्लिक स्ट्रक्चर. एंड ग्लाइकोसाइड्स मतलब ग्लाइकोसाइडिक बॉन्ड कब आता है? शुगर. सो अमाइन स्ट्रक्चर प्लस शुगर, सो अमाइनो ग्लाइकोसाइड्स. So streptomycin, gentamicin, amikacin, neomycin and others are there. Then macrolide antibiotic. macro means बड़ा, macro means क्या? बड़ा. Lide means क्या? lactone ring. So those antibiotics which has a large lactone ring, central large lactone ring, they are known as a macrolide antibiotics. For example, erythromycin, clarithromycin, azithromycin. So जो clarithromycin, troxythromycin is also there. Erythromycin, clarithromycin, azithromycin, troxythromycin. So all these are the macrolide antibiotics. Then next one is a lincosamide. So lincomycin and clindamycin. Question इसके ऊपर भी आता है. One of the following is a lincomycin. One of the following antibacterial drug belongs to lincomycin. So lincosamide. So lincomycin and clindamycin. तो लिंकोमाइसिन तो आपको ऑप्शन में देंगे नहीं, क्योंकि लिंको सेम हो जाएगा. आपको ऑप्शन में देंगे क्लिंडामाइसिन, फिर उसका छोटा भाई का नाम. नाउ नेक्स्ट वन इज अ ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड एंटीबायोटिक्स. तो ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड मतलब शुगर प्लस पेप्टाइड, शुगर प्लस प्रोटीन. ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड मतलब क्या? ग्लाइको मतलब शुगर, पेप्टाइड मतलब क्या? प्रोटीन. सो ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड एंटीबायोटिक्स लाइक दिस vancomycin and tacoplanine, vancomycin and tacoplanine. Now next, oxazolidine diones. So example is a linezolid. Question इसके ऊपर भी आ चुका है. Oxazolidine dione, linezolid. Okay. Then next one is a polypeptide antibiotics. So okay, polypeptide antibiotics. So polymyxin B. तो ये तो आपको इजीली समझ में आएगा. poly for polypeptide. बाकी एग्जांपल याद रखो. कोलिस्टीन, बेसिट्रासिन, थायरोथ्रिसिन. नेक्स्ट वन इज नाइट्रोफ्यूरॉन डेरिवेटिव. नाइट्रो मतलब नाइट्रो ग्रुप रहेगा और फ्यूरॉन मतलब 5 मेंबर्ड रिंग रहेगा, 5 मेंबर्ड प्लस ऑक्सीजन. सो नाइट्रोफ्यूरॉन डेरिवेटिव. सो ऑब्वियसली नाइट्रोफ्यूरॉन में नाइट्रोफ्यूरॉन आएगा, तो ये तो इजीली समझ में आएगा. ये भी समझ आएगा. फ्यूराजोलिडिन. pyrazolidone. So this nitrofuran and pyrazolidone, they are used in the UTI, urinary tract infection, UTI and GTL, gastrointestinal tract infection. तो आपको देखो, आपको डायरिया लग गया है तो आपको मेडिकल पे जाके आपकी पीली कलर की दवाई देंगे, उसमें होता है pyrazolidone. अगर आपको यूरिनरी ट्रैक्ट इन्फेक्शन हो गया तो उसमें नाइट्रोपिरांटाइन का टैबलेट देंगे या फिर आपको क्विनोलोन देंगे. So next one is a nitroimidazole derivative. Nitroimidazole derivative. So in that metronidazole and tinidazole, metronidazole, nidazole. Okay. So nitroimidazole derivative. Nicotinic acid derivative. So nicotinic acid उसके structure में रहेगा. So in that you have isoniazide, pyrazinamide and ethionamide. So all these nicotinic acid derivative, antibacterial drug, they are used as a they are used in the tuberculosis और leprosy. So ये जो isoniazide है, pyrazinamide या फिर आपका ethionamide. So all these are the nicotinic acid derivative and they are used against the mycobacteria, anti-tuberculosis drug और anti-leprotic drug. और पॉलीइन एंटीबायोटिक में क्या रहेगा, निस्टैटिन, एम्फोटेरेसिन बी एंड एमाइसिन. इन मतलब क्या है कि पॉली मतलब बहुत सारा, इन मतलब क्या है अल्कीन डबल बॉन्ड्स. सो पॉलीन मतलब उसमें बहुत सारे डबल बॉन्ड्स रहेंगे. सो पॉलीन, निस्टैटिन एंड एम्फोटेरेसिन बी. एम्फोटेरेसिन बी का स्ट्रक्चर अगर किसी ने देखा तो उसमें बहुत सारे डबल बॉन्ड है स्टैटिन की. सो पॉलीन. एजोल डेरिवेटिव. So in that miconazole, ketoconazole, fluconazole, itraconazole, both are there. All these are the antifungal drugs. Azoles are the antifungal. Miscellaneous or other. Okay. So in that you have rifampicin, spectrinamycin, ethambutol, cycloserine, thioestazone, clopazimide. So these are nothing but the chemical classes of antibiotics. इसमें कुछ 22 classes है chemical. So you have to remember the classification. There is no other option. So these antibiotics, they are again classified into depending on their spectrum. जैसे होता है आपका narrow spectrum antibiotic, wide spectrum antibiotic. जैसे narrow spectrum मतलब एक particular type की बैक्टीरिया को इनहिबिट करेंगे, जैसे penicillin cephalosporins. They are only effective against the gram-positive bacteria and fungus. So they are narrow spectrum. Okay, but macrolide, aminoglycoside antibiotic, aminoglycoside antibiotic, and other. So they are known as tetracyclines, particularly tetra aminoglycosides and macrolides. So they are effective against variety of microorganisms. So that's why they are known as a broad spectrum antibiotic. Chlorphenicol, particularly chlorphenicol, tetracyclines, aminoglycosides, they are known as a broad spectrum antibiotic. यहाँ पे लिखा नहीं लेकिन बोल रहा हूँ, you have to remember. Penicillin cephalosporins, they are effective only in a particular class of bacteria like gram-positive bacteria. And they are known as a narrow spectrum. Depending on the spectrum of activity also, they are classified. So these antibiotics, they have common adverse effect, like they can cause rash. जैसे at the site of injection, जहाँ पे इंजेक्शन दिया वहाँ पे क्या करेंगे आपको, या फिर थ्रोम्बोफ्लेबाइटिस करेंगे, आपके इन्फ्लेमेशन करेंगे, सूजन आएगा. So that is nothing but the systemic. Okay, that is the local toxicity of antibiotic. तो लोकली जब इंजेक्शन देंगे तो उसमें स्वेलिंग आ सकता है, थ्रोम्बोफ्लेबाइटिस हो सकता है. सिस्टमिक टॉक्सिटी, तो सिस्टमिक जब इंजेक्शन अंदर ब्लड बॉडी में जाएगा वो उसके बाद में क्या टॉक्सिटी हो सकती है. तो सिस्टमिक टॉक्सिटी डिपेंडिंग ऑन द therapeutic index. So these antibacterial drugs again classified into different. So those antibacterial drugs having high therapeutic index, मतलब they are very safe. So these antibiotics like penicillins, cephalosporins and macrolides. Penicillin, cephalosporins and macrolides, they are very safe. Okay, so even doubling or dose or 24 dose, that is also safe of these penicillin. Penicillins will have one adverse effect known as anaphylaxis in some patients. कुछ patient में वो क्या है, allergic है. Okay, that is another thing. But they have a high therapeutic index. So ये ज़्यादा कोई, these are the safe drug like penicillin, cephalosporins and macrolide antibiotics. Low therapeutic index drug और low therapeutic index antibiotics इसमें आएगा aminoglycosides. Remember इसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन आता है. Aminoglycosides are low therapeutic index. Okay, particularly they have one adverse effect known as a weakness. Damage your eighth cranial nerve and will cause deafness and also has a kidney toxicity. Again, tetracyclines. They adversely affect your liver and kidney. Also has a teratogenic effect, okay, an anti-anabolic effect, Fanconi syndrome. And third is a chloramphenicol, okay. So it depresses the bone marrow. और जो भी एंटीबायोटिक बोन मैरो को डिप्रेस करेगा उसका एक एडवर्स इफेक्ट रहेगा कौन सा एनी एंटीबायोटिक डिप्रेसेस द बोन मैरो सो पर्टिकुलर एडवर्स इफेक्ट ऑफ दैट एंटीबायोटिक इज ड्रग अगर बोन मैरो को डिप्रेस करता है तो उसका एडवर्स इफेक्ट क्या होता है ए प्लास्टिक एनीमिया or thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia, aplastic anemia, like that. Yes, he is correct. Okay. So anybody, any antibiotic or any drug that can depresses the bone marrow. So faulty formation of RBC, faulty formation of WBCs, etc. Okay. So low therapeutic index drug कौन से याद रखो एंटीबायोटिक में अमीनो ग्लाइकोसाइड टेट्रासाइक्लिन्स क्लोराम्फेनिकोल ओके एंड इन दैट आल्सो वेरी लो थेरेपेटिक इंडेक्स ड्रग तो इसका सेफ्टी ऑफ मार्जिन बहुत ही कम होता है very low therapeutic index drug. Okay? So high therapeutic index drug, penicillin, cephalosporin, macrolide, low therapeutics, amino glycoside, tetracycline, chloramphenicol, and very low therapeutics. Okay. So in that you have polymyxin B. It has a very bad neurological toxicity and renal toxicity. Then vancomycin again causes the hearing loss, deafness, and kidney toxicity. Amphotericin B, kidney damage and bone marrow as well as neurological toxicity. So इसमें आपको याद रखना है कि लो इंडेक्स ड्रग कौन से है और लो और वेरी लो थेरेपेटिक इंडेक्स ड्रग ये इंपॉर्टेंट है पॉलीमिक्सिन वैंकोमाइसिन एम्फोटेरिसिन पॉलीन जो होता है पॉलीन जैसे पॉलीमिक्सिन हो गया आपका एम्फोटेरिसिन हो गया ये तो पॉलीन हो गए देन वैंकोमाइसिन आल्सो सो दे आर वेरी लो थेरेपेटिक इंडेक्स ये इनका इधर उधर कॉन्सेंट्रेशन हो गया तो आपका न्यूरोलॉजिकल डैमेज कर देंगे. So then low therapeutic index में आता है amino glycoside, tetracycline and chloramphenicol. So you have to remember this. There are another way to classify जैसे type of gram those antibiotic which are effective against the gram positive, which are effective against the gram negative. तो उसका भी example होता है वो आप बाद में देख लेंगे. Resistance developed by mutation or gene transfer to antimicrobial agent. क्या था कि पहले ज़माने में एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग बहुत ही कम थे सो इन्फेक्शन हो गया एंटीबायोटिक दे दिया क्लियर हो गया क्या हो चुका है कि बैक्टीरिया बहुत ही बदमाश हो गई सो दे आर मेकिंग चेंज इन देयर जेनेटिक स्ट्रक्चर सो दैट दे कैन सर्वाइव इन द एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग सर्वाइव अगेंस्ट द एंटीबैक्टीरियल ड्रग सो दे आर मेकिंग चेंजेस इन द जेनेटिक मटेरियल सो दैट इज नथिंग बट द म्यूटेशन nowadays most of bacteria are resistant to whatever antibiotics are available. That's why antibiotics should not be taken over the counter. So that should antibiotics should not be dispensed on the over the counter. मतलब मुंह से बोलेंगे नहीं सर मुझे 2-3 टैबलेट दो एजिथ्रोमाइसिन का. So you should not do that because once your body gets once the bacteria gets resistant to that antibiotic, so it is useless. अगर बैक्टीरिया को रेजिस्टेंस आ गया उसमें तो उसका यूज नहीं होगा वो एंटीबायोटिक ओके सो यू हैव टू फाइंड द न्यू एंटीबायोटिक whatever antibiotic we have they have already developed in the 19th century so whatever antibiotic now we are using they were already developed in the 19th century and from that time there is no single antibiotic which is developed ऐसा कोई एंटीबायोटिक नहीं है हुआ उसके बाद में कुछ नया एंटीबायोटिक है तो ऑलमोस्ट आफ्टर 19th century और 20th century भी एंटीबायोटिक आया है नहीं उसके बाद में whatever new molecules they are coming in the market they are nothing but the semi synthetic derivative of the previous one कि होता है ना कि सिप्रोफ्लॉक्सिन आ गया ठीक है तो उसके बाद में उसका कुछ मॉडिफाई करके ओफ्लॉक्सिन बना या फिर उसका मॉडिफाई करके स्पारफ्लॉक्सिन बना all these are nothing but the semi synthetic derivative so if the resistance comes then your antibiotic is ineffective useless so resistance might become different due to different mechanisms like single step mutation multi-step mutation. A single step means single gene is responsible for the mutation. A single gene mutation resistance. For example, okay, so Enterococcus नाम का bacteria, Enterococcus. Now it is resistant to streptomycin. Enterococcus become resistant to streptomycin due to this single step mutation type. Okay. Then E. coli become E. coli. Then Staphylococcus both become resistant to rifampin by this single step mutation. मल्टी स्टेप म्यूटेशन, नंबर ऑफ जीन्स, यहाँ पे मल्टी मतलब नंबर ऑफ जीन्स मॉडिफिकेशन the bacteria which decreases the sensitivity of antibiotic. For example, resistance to the erythromycin, tetracycline, and chloromethicol developed by many organisms in this multi-step mutation. A particular strain of bacteria is resistant to particular antibiotic. कोई अगर बैक्टीरिया है उसका एक जैसे ई कोलाई में बहुत सारा फैमिली होता है। ई कोलाई अगर रेजिस्टेंस हो गया आपके पेनिसिलिन को या फिर दूसरे एंटीबायोटिक को, so it will transfer that resistance to their daughters. It will transfer the resistance to their upcoming generation. Okay. Transfer of antimicrobial resistance, it is done by the process of conjugation, like multiple gene resistance and transduction and transduction in case of Staphylococcus aureus. In case of Staphylococcus aureus, resistance to the antibiotic is by transduction. Then transformation, there is a in case of pneumococci and Neisseria gonorrhea एंटीबायोटिक, मतलब कॉन्जुगेशन से बहुत सारे ड्रग है जो रेजिस्टेंस उनको मिलता है। क्वेश्चन इसके ऊपर आ सकता है, मोस्ट ऑफ द ड्रग्स दे डेवलप अ रेजिस्टेंस टू एंटीबायोटिक बाय द प्रोसेस ऑफ, so remember most of the drug they used to get resistance, they used to develop resistance to the antibiotic by conjugation process. So this Staphylococcus aureus become resistant to antibiotic by the process of transduction. Then this Neisseria gonorrhoeae pneumococci, they develop resistance by the process of transformation. Now this process, if you want to read this process, you can read from microbiology. Bacterial genetics में वो पूरा multiply होगा, so actually that is not much important. What do you mean by super infection? Super infection, it is nothing but the appearance of new infection as a result of antimicrobial therapy because of the destruction of microbial flora or natural defense of the body. So complete suppression of microbial flora of the body as a highest or greater chance for infection. दिखाता हूँ मैं आपको, बोलता हूँ कैसे। मान लीजिए कि आपको कोई भी कंडीशन के लिए आपको फिजिशियन ने एंटीबायोटिक दिया है, ओके, व्हाट हैपेंस, सो बाय टेकिंग दैट एंटीबायोटिक देयर आर लॉट ऑफ यूजफुल बैक्टीरिया प्रेजेंट इन योर गट। जो आपका जीआईटी होता है उसमें बहुत सारे यूजफुल बैक्टीरिया होते हैं, सो दोज आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर आवर, ओके. So some bacteria will synthesize B complex vitamin in the GIT. Some bacteria will synthesize the vitamin lipid soluble like vitamin D in the gut. Okay. So if you take antibiotic, तो antibiotic तो ये नहीं करेगा कि ये antibiotic will not able to differentiate between useful bacteria and useless bacteria. तो वो अपना helpful कौन सा है या फिर आपका कौन सा है उसमें डिफरेंस नहीं कर पाएंगे. And the antibiotic will kill both kind of bacteria. So your important bacteria from GIT is also being killed by antibiotic with the pathogenic bacteria. Now what happens? So due to that, what a diarrhea. You get diarrhea. जिससे होगा एंटीबायोटिक ले लिया तो किसी किसी को डायरिया हो जाता है, because that is because of the super infection. So appearance of new infection as a result of antimicrobial therapy because of the destruction of microbial flora or natural defense of the body. Okay. So complete suppression of microbial flora of the body has a higher or greater chance to developing super infection. तो डॉक्टर भी क्या करते हैं, जब आपको एंटीबायोटिक का एक पर्टिकुलर टाइम स्पेंड तो एक कोर्स होता है जैसे 8 दिन के लिए, बाद में उसके बाद में आपको विटामिन देंगे या फिर आपको प्रीबायोटिक्स और प्रोबायोटिक्स देंगे, बिकॉज टू रिप्लेस दैट जीआईटी फ्लो.